The modern state exists not to protect our rights, but to do us good or make us good. Anyway, to do something to us or to make us something. Hence the new name leaders for those who were once rulers. We are less their subjects than their wards, pupils, or domestic animals. There is nothing left of which we can say to them, mind your own business. Our whole lives are their business. This is Pints with Jack, Season 9, Episode 18, The Abolition of Man, Chapter 3, The Abolition of Man. Part 1, Man's Conquest of Nature.
Have you been looking everywhere, searching for a place where you belong? Away from the masses, among clinking glasses, where the hearth fire is on. Let the laughter welcome you in, that eagle and child din. There's room at this table, so take a seat and tuck right in. For Pints with Jack, Pints with Jack.
Well, welcome, friends, to Pints with Jack. You observant listeners will notice that I am not Matthew Bush. We think that he is at the point of having young little Michael Andrew, and so David and I are carrying on in his absence today. For the past couple of months, we've been working our way through the Abolition of Man this year, and today we begin the final chapter. This chapter shares its name with the book, The Abolition of Man, so whatever Lewis is going to tell us, it's going to be important, and it's probably not going to be good. So, because it's just the two of us today with Matt at the hospital, God bless him. How are you, David?
I'm great. Although he just thinks having a baby is an excuse to miss a recording episode. They have Wi-Fi in hospitals too. It would be perfect entertainment for Mary Margaret to take her mind off everything and welcome his little shrub into the world.
The little shrub. You certainly never let any baby stop you, right?
Certainly not. Certainly not.
And you planned ahead as well.
I have to. Always kids incoming.
Yes.
But no, I'm well. I've had this big work deadline hanging over my head for the last month or so, and we hit our deadline. Needless to say, there's always cleanup that you've got to do afterwards. So this week is suitably active as well. But I am looking forward to life being a little less crazy. And I'm really hoping I will get some time to go and watch the new He-Man movie, whose trailer I saw drop last week, and I am very excited. Little 8-year-old David in 1988 is exceptionally excited. A few things about it I'm not too psyched about, but just the fact that He-Man is coming back into the popular discussion makes me very happy.
Absolutely. Well, good. Anything else? How are the kids doing? What's your reading life like?
Kids are great. Actually, Henry got his first gift in the mail. It was from Jordan from the Lesser Known Lewis podcast. He just addressed it to Henry. It's an essay collection for C.S. Lewis. Nice little small book covering his faith, his Christianity, and the church. And there was no note on it, but I guessed who had to have sent it. And I went, was this you? He says, I figure he's got to start with some good Lewis, before you push the larger works, the better known works onto him.
Actually, that book is a wonderful collection. Harder to find is its companion volume, which has to do with literature and criticism. I had a copy. I think I lent it to a student once, and it never came back again. And now they're like $100. But the blue one, the one on faith that you have, that you just held up, is still currently in print. Between those two volumes, you have almost every single essay in material form of Lewis's essays. So that's quite a redoubtable gift. So
I might borrow it from Henry and read ahead a little bit before he gets the chance.
I imagine you shall. So
the other thing that I'm reading is Beowulf, because I interviewed Dr. Reinhard about it for Jack's Bookshelf, which will be coming up at the end of this season. And my curiosity was piqued. So I am reading Beowulf to my wife after all the kids have gone to bed. And this is actually a really good time of year to do it in January while it's dark outside and strange noises. I'm pretty confident that there are some beasts outside our door. And little Lucy, she talks a lot about monsters. When something gets pushed over, she always tells me that a monster did it.
Oh, she's got quite an imagination, doesn't she?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's not the Heaney translation, is it?
No, this is Dr. Reinhardt's own translation. Because one of my
great.
questions when I do Jack's Bookshelf is, is there any particular translation you recommend? He says, well, mine. So I picked it up, and it's really enjoyable. I'm really liking it. But how about yourself?
Wonderful.
What have you been up to? What have you been reading?
Let's see. Not a ton of reading, but I'm hoping that will change. It's a busy season at work. We've got some health issues and some vacation issues, and I'm on the cusp of finishing edits on my dissertation. So hopefully by the time we record our next episode, I will be the Reverend Doctor. I love Beowulf, and if you haven't read Tolkien's essay on Beowulf, The Monsters and the Critics, it is incredibly readable, and it turned Beowulf criticism on its head, because Tolkien basically said, we don't read Beowulf for the linguistics or for the maps or the history of Scandinavian culture. There's only two reasons to read Beowulf. One is that it's a poem, and the other is because it's about monsters. And so I think that Lucy's on the right track. So haven't done a ton of reading, but I've got a few things in the rotation. And I was enjoying Amy Beck Lee's This Homeward Ache on the plane back, and wonderful phrases and such a great sentiment. So I've got some poetry that I'm trying to dip into, but work has been busy. So I'm looking forward to that, kind of evening out a little bit. So Kristen and I are doing well. It's cold here in Florida, but fortunately no snow. And she actually had a conference cancel, so it was good to get some more time with her. And with the cold weather, I felt like making chicken curry, so I've been eating from that for the last couple of days. So, yep, all good. Well, what are you drinking as we're here in the afternoon?
Well, since today's title is Man's Conquest of Nature, I am drinking that which allows me to conquer my own nature, in particular my natural inclination to take afternoon naps. So, needless to say, I'm having some Yorkshire Gold tea.
Lovely. On Tuesdays, I make a pot of Yorkshire Gold, or Bewley's Irish Breakfast, for our organist who's British, and he comes by for a spot of tea. So I had a couple of cups of that earlier, just quite delicious. Because I've got some work ahead of me tonight in my Belfast mug, I'm drinking some Starbucks Sumatra. So, and I think our toast today, who are we toasting?
It's Mr. Joel Horbaker, who we both met at the Oregon conference.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, Joel, we raise our cups of afternoon energy to you and pray that you would be energized in the work that God has given you to do as a father, as a stepfather, as a scholar, as a husband, and especially as a servant of our Lord. We raise our cups and are thankful to God for you. So cheers.
Cheers. Well, as I've said before, The Abolition of Man is quite a dense work, and so we're taking our time moving through it, and at the start of each episode, I want to situate us and recap how Lewis has built up the argument so far. So, using an English school textbook as his springboard, Jack speaks against the philosophy of subjectivism covertly taught within its pages. And after giving numerous cross-cultural examples from world history, Lewis affirms a doctrine of objective value, which he describes as the Tao. Then, at the start of chapter 2, Lewis explores how one might attempt to justify a system of values outside of the Tao. Utilitarianism fails, as it can't provide personal motivation. Reason fails because you can't get an is from an ought. And instinct fails for the same reason, and it's further complicated by the fact that our instincts often conflict with each other. And so from this, he concludes that the principles of the Tao have to be our starting premises. And he says that those who attack the Tao are nevertheless dependent upon the Tao and can only launch an attack by cherry-picking certain parts of the Tao. Having said that, he said last week that some development can take place, but it must be done organically within the Tao, not externally in a surgical manner. And Lewis ended that second chapter by pointing out that some people would wish to abandon the Tao entirely and attempt to shape mankind not on the grounds of any imagined value, but simply because it was the way they wanted mankind to be. And this is an idea which he continues to explore in chapter 3.
So if Matt were here right now, he would probably say in his best Yoda voice, Tao or do not Tao? There is no try.
I think he would actually ask me to put it into AI and come up with a one-sentence summary.
Absolutely.
But instead, we are going to kick things off by talking about the epigraph, because Lewis loves to put epigraphs on his chapters. What did you make of this one's?
It came burning hot into my mind, whatever he said and however he flattered, that when he got me home to his house, he would sell me for a slave. So this is from John Bunyan. Lewis wrote an essay about John Bunyan. In fact, it's one of those things that you can find in Lewis's own voice, him reading that essay. And Lewis's own The Pilgrim's Regress is quite a nod to Pilgrim's Progress.
Very heavily allegorical.
Absolutely. So in this quote, one of the characters is faithful. Faithful stands for somebody who is faithful. That's how allegory works. And he's speaking about another person in the story, Adam the First. So he's saying that the first man, that no matter what our human nature might do, our human nature is bound to do us in. And that seems to be some of what's going on in this chapter.
And I don't think we actually said this is being pulled from the Pilgrim's Progress.
Yes, sorry. Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. And yes.
And Faithful is talking about this Adam the First. And he says that he spoke well and he actually thought about going with him. Throughout the Pilgrim's Regress, it's all about who do you want to travel with? Because who do you think is going to get you to where you need to go? And he says he thought about doing that, but then he saw written on this guy's head, Adam the First, put off the old man with his deeds. And if you're a Bible nerd, you're going to see that that's an allusion to the first man, to Adam. And
yes.
So Paul talks about Adam in these terms in Ephesians 4, 1 Corinthians 15. And this is Faithful's response once he's read that. He says, once he saw this put off the old man with his deeds, it came burning hot into my mind. Whatever he said, whatever he flattered. He got me home to his house. He would sell me for a slave.
When I was, my initial Christian training was in the Baptist church, and we talked a lot about the first Adam and the second Adam, or the sin nature and the divine nature in us. And in fact, I had a friend who's the one who first invited me to church. Her father was a pastor. And when she was a young girl, she did something naughty. She was 4 or 5 or so, did something naughty, broke something. And her father said to her, Sally, who broke the lamp? And she said, oh, Harold broke the lamp. Well, she was an only child. And he said, who in the world is Harold? And she said, oh, it's my fallen man. It's my sin nature. And so St. Paul talks about that, the old man, the old person in me, the sin nature that has been defeated by Christ, but is still there. I had a Bible teacher once who likened the first man to, likened our fallen nature to being a member of the crew on a ship. And the old captain has been deposed and removed from power, and a new captain is in place. But if the old captain were to come up to us and order us around, we'd still be inclined to follow him. And I think that that's a little bit of who he's talking about in terms of this first man, this first Adam. And that sin nature will always sell us for a slave. It'll always sell us down the river. Is this the first man? Is this the man who should be abolished?
Well, exactly, because Paul, when in Ephesians 4, when he's talking about the old man, he speaks about putting him to death, that he has to be constantly pushed back. And so it is an open question. It's like, well, is actually this the man that should be abolished instead?
Yeah.
But what's really interesting about this epitaph is this reference to slavery, because slavery is actually present in this chapter's title, and actually the book's title, of course, The Abolition of, normally you would say the abolition of slavery. That's the most common term that you would fill in there. So there was a quotation in Dr. Ward's book from John Finnis, who says that the real theme of the lecture, the one that we're about to go through, was not the abolition of man, but the enslavement of man, the enslavement of the conditioners who repudiate the Tao by their own necessarily irrational impulses, and the enslavement of all the rest by the conditioners.
Mm-hmm. And he's really kind of pointing out, and I just really loved thinking through this, listening through this, reading through this, and conceiving things the way that Lewis is pointing them out. It's just such clear thinking, and this is why I'm so devoted. So he gets right into it, right, and talking about man's conquest of nature and wondering if that's even possible.
First of all, he has to explain what does that actually mean. And he says, well, we generally mean the progress of applied science, practical science. And he begins by telling this rather touching story of a friend who was dying of tuberculosis, who said that man has nature whacked because he regarded himself as a casualty in a war, but he was on the winning side of the war, that between man and nature, man was going to win and nature was going to take him out, but he just saw himself as a casualty in that war. It's a very personal moment for Lewis in these lectures, because I'd say generally they've been quite impersonal. So he says that he begins in this way because he wants to make sure that the readers understand that he's not disparaging what we mean by man's conquest, or that the sacrifices made in its pursuit, particularly in terms of fighting against death and disease. But it is going to come under fire.
Yes. And as is typical of Lewis, he's going to throw out a term, but then he's going to define it and see, what we might possibly mean. The way that he continues to clarify not only his language, but also our thinking is one of the great gifts of this book.
Although I do think that this chapter needed to be 2 chapters. I think he rushes through quite a lot of stuff. And I think a good bits of argument just aren't made. He's doing that very Lewisian thing where he gives you a very striking image and he gets his point across, but he hasn't actually defended it. So,
I think that there's a couple of bits in this, and I think that part of the reason why, because this is around the same time he's doing a similar thing by his lectures that become Mere Christianity. And so he's doing an enormous amount of theology or philosophy or thinking in some really shorter bits. And then he's also giving it as lectures to undergraduates, mostly to the University of Durham. And so there's some of that where I think that he's kind of touching on the surface and there's a lot of depth underneath. That's part of why this book is, I don't know how many pages, not very many. It's 90 some. The other thing is, and Diana Glyer and I have been chatting about this. Yeah, see, now Matt's got me doing it. 113 in pages, including notes. Diana and I have been talking about this. Lewis gives us more credit than we deserve. Right? He thinks that we are better thinkers than we are, and he thinks that we are better read than we are. And he's such a well-trained philosopher that he is going through great gobbets of philosophy, assuming that we're going to track with him, which is part of why this book is maddening and difficult, but also still, at the fore, because as we climb its depths, there's loads of good stuff underneath.
And when we do the retrospective for the book as a whole, we're going to have Dr. Ward on the show. And one of the questions we're going to ask him is, what's further reading for The Abolition of Man to fill out what Lewis is saying here?
I'm sure he'll tell you it's Till We Have Faces. By the way, I'm looking forward very much to our conversation with him. And I'm supposed to have the bishop over the day that we record. He's coming by to talk about Lewis to the house, and I'm going to cook for him. And I managed to move the time a little bit so that we should have plenty of space. So,
and it's not easy to move a bishop, as we know. Why? Because they can only move diagonally.
Move diagonally. Da, 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 da. Did you see Bishop Curry standing on the checkerboard when Harry and Meghan got married? Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely.
Well, back to the text. So he's
Sure.
just said, I'm not disparaging man's conquest of nature and some of what we mean by that. So with that proviso in place, he then digs into the phrase itself. In what sense is man the possessor of increasing power over nature?
Mm-hmm.
And his answer is very surprising.
Yes, it's fascinating. Yeah, he fundamentally says that man doesn't have conquest over nature. It's some men have conquest over other men, right? And so he's defining his terms. He says, man's conquest of nature is an expression often used to describe the progress of applied science. Man has nature whacked, said a friend of mine. Lewis says, I've chosen this story about my friend dying of tuberculosis as my point of departure in order to make it clear that I do not wish to disparage all that is really beneficial in the process described as man's conquest, much less all the real devotion and self-sacrifice that has gone to make it possible. But having done so, I must proceed to analyze this conception a little more closely. That's a bell ringer. When Lewis says that, he's about to roll up his intellectual sleeves. In what sense is man the possessor of increasing power over nature?
But it's the question of who has this conquest, who has this power. And he unpacks this by giving 3 examples to consider. And they're kind of bizarre. The airplane, the radio, and the contraceptive.
Yeah.
And this is one of the sections where I'd say this needed teasing out a little bit more. He points out that, strictly speaking, anyone can pay to use these things.
And I think that he's pulling these examples to show perhaps possible conquest over nature. Like the airplane has allowed us to conquer distance
Gravity.
And sky, right?
Yeah.
The wireless has allowed us to conquer distance and to communicate. We don't need material to communicate over a long way. It's not like sending a letter. The contraceptive, in perspective anyway, gives us power over reproduction, and so it robs some sex of its consequences. So they seem to be these kind of advances that science has made that allow us such a conquest, right? Is that why he pulls these examples? Do you think?
Yeah. I think that's spot on. That's why he's chosen these, and he says that your average Joe can use any of these. You can buy a plane ticket, purchase a radio, or some contraception. But he then points something out. He says that if I pay you to carry me, I am therefore not strong. I have purchased the ability from you. And his point is that the person who really has power isn't the person who uses these things, but the person who supplies them. In this case, the airline, the radio manufacturer, the radio stations, the drug manufacturers. These are the people that actually have the power.
Right. And anybody who's ever been at the mercy of an airline canceling or delaying a flight knows that they have power and we do not, right?
Flashbacks to Manchester with 2 small children. Never again.
Bless your heart. But it's also, I think that it's a really important point that an airplane doesn't necessarily mean that I have power. It just, my money allows me to purchase a seat on this thing that somebody else has made. And in some ways, that's not me having any more power over nature at all. Right? I never would have thought about that. And that's, part of why I love this. Yeah.
You can sort of think of it like, I can send a message around the world. Not if I disconnect your Wi-Fi. You can do nothing. You are dependent upon a lot of other things.
Right.
And this is why he says what we call man's power is in reality a power possessed by some men, which they may or may not allow other men to profit by. And he goes through those examples, and you can see the World War II context that he is in. When we think of airplanes, we think principally just travel. When Jack thought about airplanes, he thought about bombs falling from the sky.
In 1942, which is what was exactly happening, right? Precisely what was happening.
And when we think of the radio or the internet, we think about communication, entertainment. He primarily thought propaganda.
And I think, is it in Mere Christianity that he talks about the potential damage to women that contraception, offers?
He speaks about the separation of different desires.
Yeah, and I know that he talks about contraception. It's like, okay, if there aren't any consequences, or permanent consequences, children from sex, that allows men to abuse women,
Hmm.
without having to take any responsibility. And so this is an example that he has used around this time, as well.
But this is, I think, the important point that's definitely worth emphasizing with these three
Hmm.
items. He is not saying that these things are necessarily intrinsically bad. If you
Hmm.
read all of Lewis's correspondence and stuff, it's pretty clear he holds to the ancient Christian teaching with regards to contraception. But, Lewis himself, he got on a plane. He flew with joy to Greece in 1960. He himself was on the radio,
Hmm.
giving the Mere Christianity lectures. So he's not saying that these advances in technology are themselves bad, or
Hmm.
he's not even talking about their abuse yet.
Hmm.
He's just talking about what they do and where the power is given.
And also saying that they don't necessarily denote me having power over
Yeah.
nature that my ancestors did not, right?
Hmm.
So these would be three clear examples where we'd say, oh yeah, we're more powerful now. But as he's looking closer, it doesn't. Yeah.
But he does look at what they enable us to do. So with regards to planes, he says, we can fly, but we can also have bombs dropped on us. With the radio, we can have communication, we can have entertainment, but we can also have propaganda. And his point about contraception is interesting. He says, and as regards to contraceptives, there is a paradoxical negative sense in which by all possible future generations are simply the patients or subjects of a power wielded
Yeah.
by those already alive. By contraception simply, they are denied existence. By contraception used as a means of selective breeding, they are, without their concurring voice, made to be what one generation, for its own reasons, may choose to prefer. And this is something else that is, again, smack bang in his context, because these questions of controlling breeding and race were forefront with the Nazi ideologies and the rise of eugenics.
Absolutely. And the Nazis are using all of these things right then. It also picks up what he has talked about earlier about progress and progress for progress's sake. And of course, we can hear the voices of Weston and Divine in here as well. The word means, as I've said before, to step forward. And Lewis is saying, to what end? To what are we progressing? What are we stepping forward to? And maybe what is the direction that we are going is not progressive, but digressive or regressive, right? Maybe it is not a good thing that we are heading towards. And so he's taking this idea of the concept of progress and then embodying it in these three examples and showing that they might not necessarily be very forward moving or forward thinking at all, right?
Yeah, and the obvious response would be someone could use the proverb abusus non tollit usum, that just abuse doesn't mean there isn't a legitimate use. Okay, fine, planes can be used to drop bombs, radio can be used to distribute propaganda. They don't necessarily have to.
Mm-hmm.
Someone might read what Jack is saying and be willing to concede that mankind has misused the powers that science has given them, but that's not the point he's making. He's considering what the thing called man's power over nature must always and essentially be. He said that even if we had public ownership of these technologies, within a nation, well, then still some nations will have it and others won't. And even if there was a single worldwide state, it would still mean that a small group of people would have a lot of power over others.
And this is where he has this idea that just astounded me. All long-term exercises of power, he says in the book, especially in breeding, must mean the power of earlier generations over later ones. Mm-hmm. And so now where he's been going for all of this book is now starting to kind of come together.
Yeah. And he focuses on that last point, namely that controlling reproduction is the power of earlier generations over later ones. And he says, we've got to do what the physicists do. Take time into account in our calculations. Yes. And he actually does this in a bunch of different places. In Christianity, he talks about this. You got to imagine humanity as a whole. It's like this organic tree shape. And here he says, we must picture the race extended in time from the date of its emergence to that of its extinction. Each generation exercises power over its successors, and each, insofar as it modifies the environment bequeathed to it and rebels against tradition, resists and limits the power of its predecessors. And this is in stark contrast to the view of human progress as ever increasing freedom from nature and human tradition.
Right. And it turns on its head Weston's point that he is trying to secure the future for future generations. But he's in fact controlling future generations, and quite literally with contraception and especially abortion, he's reducing future generations. So it's the current age not progressing and advancing, but it's the current age limiting and killing what would come after. And so, yeah, it's just a quagmire.
Yeah, he says that if a generation ever achieves the power to truly shape its descendants, those descendants will be patients of that power. They will feel the consequences, and as we're going to see, that's not always a two-way street. You might start heading down a road where you actually can't turn around, and particularly with all the things we've mentioned: eugenics, contraception, abortion. This shapes humanity as a whole. And there's this line in there. Earlier when he was talking about the radio, in my head I replaced that with social media or the internet. And then Lewis drops this line: "They are weaker, not stronger, for though we may have put wonderful machines in their hands, we have preordained how they are to use them." What a wonderful description of the cell phones that give us limitless capabilities, but those who give them to us shape very much how we use them.
Yes. Well, I think it's time to quote a poem by Malcolm Guite.
Okay.
It's called Iode, I-O-D-E,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a little poem for my iPhone, which Malcolm actually wrote on his iPhone. And this is what he says. It's a little sonnet. Iode. My private portal to a world between, my placeless place of virtual exchange. I see through you, though you remain unseen, and make familiar what you once made strange. You make a stranger means to make me friend, whom I can touch, to like, to show I care. You make a means to every unknown end, and make one little screen an everywhere. I am familiar with 100 faces, all famished for their 15 minutes fame. I am half present in 100 places, but never present in the place I am. I pull you from my pocket when you call. I touch and swipe as I am bid to do. You do my bidding too. You do it all. What will you make of me, or I of you? So not exactly a sonnet, but still this embodying this whole idea of what's going on and what will these machines do? Are they helping us or maybe not so much?
He makes an interesting point. He says that power decreases as we come closer to our extinction. And the analogy that I assembled in my head to visualize this is, imagine if you're doing a car share. The last person that gets the car will have the least amount of gas, and they will have the least distance to travel at that point. Whereas the people much earlier in the journey, those are the ones that get to set the direction that you're on.
So what's a car share? Is that something?
Ride share, like multiple people sitting in a car driving somewhere.
Oh yeah, okay. Sorry. Yeah.
I'm English, you see.
Okay.
It's good to know I can still flummox an American.
You put it in a car park when you're done, right?
Naturally. Lewis asks us to imagine humanity reaching this necessary level of control in the 30th century. And he says this will be the generation that will control all others. But even the power that will be wielded by that generation will still just be a subset of people. And we will get into this next season when we explore that hideous strength, where Lewis gives us a very clear incarnation of all of these ideas.
Yeah.
But the line that is kind of chilling, he says, the battle will be won. We shall have taken the thread of life out of the hand of Clotho. Andrew, who's Clotho?
Thank you for asking. Clotho is one of the three Moirai, or the goddesses of fate, of the ancient Greek pantheon. And each of these goddesses was considered to perform an important task regarding a human being's thread of life. The fates were the ones who wove together people's lives. Clotho spun, Lachesis gave it out, and Atropos cut it off. And I owe a great thanks, of course, to our great friend Aaron Smildy for helping out some of that. His Louisiana.nl, if you don't know it, is wonderfully helpful. So that's Clotho.
But he's painting this picture of we have wrestled control away from the fates. We determine ourselves.
Yes, we are weaving whatever will come next.
And he says that men have always tried to do this, try to exercise power over others by nurture, education. But he sees the coming future as being different because conditioners of the past, they had their theories, but they had very little power to be able to exercise them. And he gives examples of Plato's Republic, Sir Thomas Eliot, and John Locke, who had each very interesting ideas about how people should be raised. But the point is that they didn't have the real power that science is or will be giving these future conditioners to really shape how human beings are formed.
Well, and it circles us back around to the Green Book, and he's taking to the nth degree the implications of what's going on and the danger that putting this book in the hands of children, will supply. And he's taking the implications all the way down.
Mm-hmm. And one of the key implications is this future generation is going to be happy to step out of the Tao. That was how we ended the last chapter. We said that you have to start with the Tao as the starting premises. You can't argue against it. It becomes utterly incoherent. And he ended by saying that some people are going to say, fine, we're not going to use it at all. We are going to just make up our own values just because they're the way that we want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that, sometime in the future, the conditioners will have been emancipated from the Tao. It is just one more part of nature which they have conquered.
In some ways, and I'm not taking a political stance here, but I've watched a fair number of the Charlie Kirk videos. And in some ways, I think what he's trying to do is say it's not just up to each individual to make it up for themselves. There is something universal. There is a Tao. There is something that we can all appeal to and agree on. And then he tries to reason people all the way along. And again, I'm not taking a political side. But what I'm saying is in watching those videos, a lot of the really interesting arguments and conversations that he has back and forth with reasonable people who disagree with him is to expose how the thought process is going and what some of the implications are. And so to some degree, what he was doing was a similar thing, a similar project to what Lewis is doing here. If this is the case, if we can make it up for ourselves, let's look at the implications of all of that. And when you really look all the way down that road, it becomes increasingly frightening, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. And that is what we will explore in the next episode. We will see what happens when we head further down this road. Because in the section we've looked at today, he's established that man's conquest of nature doesn't really mean man's as a whole. It means some portion of mankind is able to do this. And the power that they exercise has far-reaching effects, particularly when we take into account the question of time and when we're particularly talking about the formation of human beings, both their bodies and their souls and intellects as they pass through education. And he's going to start unpacking what does it look like, though, when we step out of the Tao and we just shape humanity how we think it should, based on nothing.
Yes, and that word should, without any roots, becomes really, really frightening. By the way, I had a conversation with Matt Wheeler earlier this week. And by the way, a little shout out from your Christians, April 24th and 25th. It looks as if we have got a sponsor to underwrite Matt Wheeler and Matthew Clark, and the wonderful Irish harpist, Fulbright scholar Hannah Flowers will be coming to do our breakouts about song and story. And so all three of those musicians will be there. But Matt, when I spoke with him, said, "Oh, I loved your latest episode on Abolition of Man. It's really helping me understand it." And I loved our latest episode too, because especially the good work that you have done and the thoughtfulness of Lewis is helping me understand it too. So, yeah, this chapter was where it all. What the third time pays it all? Is that the third chapter pays it?
Well, I mean, with this whole book, it really is one that you have to keep going back over to understand the nuances of some of his arguments and also how it all fits together. And like I said, I think this third chapter, the review that we're going to do at the end of this chapter and then the book review as a whole, I think we will probably spend quite a bit of time in this chapter parsing out what Lewis is and is not saying. Because I can see this being a chapter that is very easy to misunderstand or just get lost. Because he does make some leaps that if you don't see how he made that leap, it sort of falls apart.
Yeah. Well, one of the things as I taught Mere Christianity at Church of the Messiah a couple of years ago, the thing that I kept doing is the same thing that you have been doing at the beginning of every episode. I took them back. Okay, we are in book 1, right and wrong is a clue to the meaning of the universe. And here's what happens in the first chapter. And here's how it led to the next chapter. And I brought them up to speed with the argument all the way along. And once you do that, then the individual chapter fits perfectly into the development of the argument. Lewis is doing this for a much more select audience and a much more particular audience, but he's doing the same thing. And I love that you're going back and reminding us, because that helps us see the direction to which we are progressing.
Yes, I'm hoping to save a few people who are reading this for the first time from the experience that I had, which was, wait, what?
Let's be honest. We're just trying to save Matt from that experience.
Oh, come on. He's probably now a daddy, so we need to be a little nicer to him. Not for very long, but a little
not
nicer.
for very long. No, it's helping me. This is the first time I've really read it through carefully enough to really to begin to understand it. So I'm grateful recipient of this really deliberate study. So cheers.
Well, I hear the call for final drinks. So thanks to our stenographer, Julia, our sound engineers, Taylor and Sarah, all of our patron supporters, particularly our top tier supporters, Jacob, Alex, John, Ryan, Dan, Jody, Dave, Brian, Meg, Rebecca, Sarah, Mark, Kevin and Paul, Bud, James, Robert, Mark, Matt, Erica, Joelle, Amanda, Thomas, Shane, Becca, Paul, Gary, Stephen, John, James, Kate, Peter, Rowdy, David, and Angela. And of course, to all of you for listening. All of us co-hosts, we pray for you every time we release an episode. And if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribed, because this month we're going to finish off this chapter and have a retrospective of the entire book with Dr. Michael Ward. So please join us again next time when Matt's baby should be born, and we'll continue going further up.
And further in.
Cheers.
Cheers.